Having heard about all the production woes and the mixed reactions coming out of the premiere and critic screens, I was pretty skeptical walking into Seoul, but now having seen it, plenty to talk about. I'm John Hayeck, and welcome to my movie thoughts. Solo: A Star Wars Story. So this is a new movie kind of directed by Ron Howard, who really knows, starring Alden Ehrenreich, Donald Glover, Amelia Clarke, Jonas something or the guy that plays Chewbacca, you know who I'm talking about, Paul Bettany, Thandie Newton, and Woody Harrelson, amongst others. And this focuses on the rise to infamy of a young Han Solo, the character that we fell in love with in the original trilogy of Star Wars films, then played by Harrison Ford, now played by Alden Ehrenreich. You see some of the traits being developed that we knew of Han Solo in the original trilogy films. You see some of the events take place that we heard referenced in the original trilogy films, and you see what makes Han Han. You see how he goes from being this kind of like street kid to being this more scoundrelish person that's going to develop into the Han that we know in years to come. And overall, I'll tell you guys this, a lot of people have been saying that this movie's a fun summer adventure, and sometimes when people use those words, it's just kind of like fluff, like, oh, Jurassic World was a fun summer adventure, or Pirates of the Caribbean 5 was a fun summer adventure, and it just kind of like to soften the blow that it's not really a good movie. But having watched this film from the perspective of like, is it coherent? Is it consistent? Does it feel like it's creative? Does it feel like it's original? Does it feel like it has personality? Do the characters mature over the course of it? Does the plot actually lead to some kind of satisfying conclusion? I can tell you guys, critically speaking, this is a pretty good movie. Just from my point of view, I quite enjoyed it, and it is a fun summer adventure in the best possible sense of the word that's actually quite good. Firstly, the cast in this thing is incredible. Donald Glover completely exemplifies everything you would expect to see from him. Not only is he charismatic and charming, not only does he have that like boyish likableness to him, but I do think that he really just he just exemplifies what the character of Lando did in the original trilogy of films. Obviously, he's a bit younger than Billy D. Williams was in those movies, but he still feels like he's kind of like nervous and insecure on the inside, and he's kind of willing to do whatever he can to like make a quick buck, while also still exemplifying that boyish charm and everything. I thought Amelia Clarke stole the show in my opinion. Kira was one character that I would have loved to see a lot more from. I want the Kira standalone movie as soon as possible, or do like a novel, or do like a comic series about her, because I don't read the novels or read the comic series, but I would totally pick one of those up, because she was a fascinating character, and I loved her chemistry with Alden Ehrenreich as Han in the movie. Chewbacca, what can you say? Chewbacca's always awesome. And I will say this, the chemistry between Kira and Han was great. The chemistry between Chewbacca and Han might have been even better. This is one of my favorite Chewbacca and Han movies ever, which you should assume since it's kind of their movie. Paul Bettany was good in the movie. Woody Harrelson was good in the movie. Overall, the entire cast did quite a good job. Alden Ehrenreich is the one that had the most pressure on his shoulders, and I will say that him playing Han Solo, he has a difficult task, because we assume this is the Han Solo that we eventually see Harrison Ford playing. When you have like a Bond story or something like that, like James Bond, and you have Sean Connery's version be different than, you know, Daniel Craig's version, because they can feel like they can take place in like different realities, different timelines and stuff like that. Their adventures are all kind of separate from each other and stuff. But in this case, you need to see Han be very, very similar to the Han we know we're going to get later on down the line, because it's a strict timeline and everything. And I think that's kind of setting Alden up to fail, because obviously he's a different person than Harrison Ford. He's not going to inflect the same way as Harrison Ford. He's not going to behave the same way as Harrison Ford. So for that reason, he does some things differently than Harrison Ford would do. And I think overall, he does his best job. He still has some of the same inflections. He still brings overall the personality of Han Solo to life in a believable way, in a way that doesn't feel like it's too big of a departure from the character that we know and love. I think that he doesn't feel like necessarily disgruntled enough, which might just be a Harrison Ford thing. But most of the time when I consider Han Solo, I consider a character that's just kind of like annoyed at the situation, just kind of like thinks everybody around him is like an idiot or a moron, and he didn't really have that in this movie, but I'm sure he'll develop it over the course of possible future films, or maybe just a thing Alden didn't want to bring to the table for whatever reason. But that was one thing in particular that just struck me as like not necessarily as Han Solo-ish as it could be. But with that aside, I did think he played a pretty convincing Han. I would tell you guys this as well. The adventure that these characters go on was really entertaining. The action sequences were well set up. The overall plot of the movie that I won't necessarily get into felt like it was compelling. It felt like it was pretty interesting stuff, and it felt like it took place in this like dirty scoundrelish world. A lot of people really complimented Rogue One because it built this like interesting mythology around the rebels. I think this movie built an even more interesting mythology around the scoundrel lifestyle, around the gangs that were kind of competing against each other, about like what people had to do, about what heists needed to take place, about how certain things played out. I thought that the worlds they created were really interesting and really beautifully shot. Props to Ron Howard, the cinematography department. I think Bradford Young's name, the cinematographer. excellent job in making the movie overall. And again, the character progression, you feel like Han starts in one place and he ends up in a different place. He doesn't just start off as the Han that we know, who ultimately has a good heart, even though he has a hard exterior. You feel like he becomes that person over the course of the movie. And same thing with Kira, who again I think is the other star of this movie. You feel like she starts in one place and she matures to another place by the end of it. I really, really like that. I think that the consistency in the movie between their characters is great. I think the consistency in general towards the pacing of the movie was quite good too. I do think that the first like 20 minutes still feel a little bit jumpy, and at times the plot can get a little bit incoherent because there's just so much going on. But besides that, I have very few other flaws with the movie. I do think that it feels a little bit surface level at times, like there isn't a ton of depth to it. And my this is a random complaint of mine, but it is a complaint of mine. Sometimes there are just those like eye-rolling lines, like Han will say something like, "Man, nobody's ever done the Kessel Run in less than 20 parsecs," and you're like, "Oh wow, I wonder what's gonna happen now. Is he gonna do it in 12 parsecs? Let's sit back and see." He didn't do any line where he's like, "I always shoot first," but I was worried the movie was going to kind of turn into just like references to other stuff, and there were a lot of references to other Star Wars material in there that I just thought got a little bit overwhelming at times. But guys, I do think that overall Solo promoted itself pretty well. It was a movie that was built on a very strong cast, that had a pretty decent plot that at times might have been incoherent, but was overall very fun to follow along with. The action sequences were great, the visuals were incredible. I felt like it didn't have a ton of depth to it, and it might have had a few too many references for its own good, but it's a movie that you guys will enjoy quite a bit, and it's a movie that if you're a casual fan of Star Wars, you'll go into and get a lot of laughs out of. You don't have to be super well versed in the lore to really like this one, which is an issue that I had with Rogue One. But guys, I do think I liked Solo more than Rogue One, and it's probably competing with The Last Jedi for me right now as to whether or not I liked it more than that. I want to see it again, and I think it's an excellently well pulled off movie for a film that changed the directors almost 80% of the way through production. So guys, be sure to let me know all of your thoughts on Solo in the comment section down below. You guys can go over to mymoviethoughts.com, follow me on Twitter at JohnHayeck, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for tons more posts from me. Links to all three of those are in the description down below. You guys can also like this video, comment on it, share it with some friends. I am John Hayeck, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching.